I appreciate you scheduling some time with us to check out Financial Sense today in a demo. How can we help today?
Yeah, we're doing all of our work tracking on spreadsheets and everybody's missing their deadlines.
We need to automate our process for managing client transactions.
We need a solution to request client tasks.
I would love to have a centralized location to keep track of client communication.
Is there anyone out there that can help me?
Y'all must not have heard of Vanilla Precise.
All right, stop, collaborate and listen. Got FC workflows on a mission, deadlines. Used to miss my assignments, no need to come through. They electronically sign them. They always forget and they waste my time. No need to stress, it automatically reminds them. Free time, listen all in one solution. Integrate my emails, know I got client details. Me time, how much do I bill them? Good thing we tracked it, invoice enacted. It's time for new clients, come on, baby, bring it. Watch the money pile, Vanilla Precise sings it. And if there was a problem, FC solves it. Check out my workflow or the DJ revolves it. And Carbon and Canopy, they have me going crazy. Task organized in neat little rows. Financial Sense, it got me working on my flows. Efficiency's up, productivity's high. Who's missing deadlines? Not I. Financial Sense, it's my saving grace. No more scrambling in this rat race. I'm in control and I've got the power, cause I'm meeting these deadlines hour after hour. Reporting. Now I got analytics so I can see what's on track and what's missing. Automation, like I got a chauffeur. And now I got projects that auto recur. Clients complete tasks, I just sit back and kick it. I needed a solution. And these guys listen, cause yo, I had a problem, but FC solved it. Check out my workflow while the DJ revolves. And tax don't make click up, they had me going crazy. Hey, book a demo today. 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 No, but like, really, it'd be cool if you booked a demo. It'd be really chill. Just please book a demo. I did this for free. Shahram, you're welcome.
Not right at the moment. I'm supposed to be on a webinar and my computer just
okay.
stopped.
Just froze. Hold on. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. So welcome to the last session of the day. Welcome, everyone. We are excited to have you. Are you guys excited? Are you ready for the last session? We got 3 amazing speakers today. You probably already heard them, but we're bringing them all together to cover some great topics. Who's ready? All right. Woo! So before we jump in, I wanted to say, if you guys had fun today, you guys found it valuable, we are also planning, we have Workflow Con coming up in October. So Scene's going to drop a call to action so you guys can register for that. It's going to be bigger and better than this. We're going to have 2 full days of speakers to cover a lot of great topics. It looks like we just lost Heather.
She was having internet, World Wide Web problems.
Oh, no. I hate the internet. Can't live with it. Can't live without it. So, yeah, you should see the register for Workflow Con below. But while we wait for Heather, let's go ahead and start off with the introductions. Kelly, if you want to start off, just give a quick introduction for yourself, just in case people missed one of your sessions from earlier.
Sure. So I'm Kelly Parks, certified professional bookkeeper up here in Canada. I also craft templated workflows for products such as Financial Sense. I am a member of the Intuit Trainer Writer Network and yada, yada, yada. But I want every accounting professional to love cloud accounting as much as I do.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Courtney, how about you?
Yeah, so I am Courtney McKay. I am the founder of AM Software Automations. I set up automations for service providers, service-based businesses like accountants, bookkeepers, and financial advisors. And I will streamline and automate their workflows and operations with primarily Zapier and also some custom automation techniques as well. So I'm basically an automation nerd.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Courtney. Thank you so much, Kelly. And hopefully we get Heather back here in a few minutes. But we can go to get started. Really excited to dive into these topics because of the breadth of experience that you guys have. So, but before I do, start off with the first question. Please make sure to drop your questions in the Q&A, not the chat, because the chat is booming and we will probably lose it buried somewhere in all the chats going on. So if you have a question, drop it in the Q&A. We're going to answer those as we go along. So let's start off with the first question. let's see, Kelly, this one's going to be for you. From your experience, what are the essential steps firms need to take to prepare their accounting processes for successful automation?
So I spoke to this a little bit earlier today, and I will sing this song to the world over and over again. Make sure you know what the outcomes are. What are you designing the system around? And then what is the outcome you're hoping the automation itself is going to achieve? So be very clear on what it is that you're looking for to happen. What's the end run? What's the end game? I would also plan around what would a failure look like, so that you can start to mitigate. So what would the outcome of a failure be? Make sure that the outcome of a failure isn't a security issue for clients. Embarrassment is, well, embarrassing, but we can all live through it. I've had some automation fails with things like placeholders in my e-newsletter that goes out, in that somebody actually put their name in weird or all in uppercase or whatever the case, right? We've seen those. Those are embarrassing. They're not life-changing. Releasing secure information for your clients. Let's say one client gets another client's information. That's an issue. So make sure you know what the automation fail is going to look like. Define the outcome of that. Is it going to be expensive to fix? Is it going to be embarrassing? Or is it actually going to be a really big problem? So define the outcome, build the processes first before you dig right into the automation. I see lots of people that they want to just go ahead and automate things, but they don't really think about the process nearly enough. And an automation built on a lousy system will accelerate lousy outcomes. So make sure the process or the system is solid. There's simple one-off automations that you can create that you don't need a whole system around. But again, go back to what does the fail look like? And then test it on yourself and on a guinea pig client. If it's going to be a client-facing automation, make sure that you're testing the bejeebers out of those. See, there are native automations to be built. This little ding dong right here decided she needed to create a Zap. The outcome was that I wanted sales receipts from Acuity to go into QuickBooks Online, Acuity being a scheduler I used to use. I wanted those to go into QuickBooks. So I built a Zap for it. It exists natively and it's better than the Zap that I built. But then some Zaps are better than a native integration. So take a look, run the tests on what a native integration looks like versus one that you need to build through an API call of some sort. Those would be the biggest things that I would say before you automate.
Perfect. Courtney, I see you shaking your head a lot. Is there anything you want to add to that, or this question?
Yeah, no, I just agree with all of that, Kelly. That was really great. I would say, just kind of piggybacking on that, definitely do your research. So as you're experimenting with things, yes, do the research, make sure that you understand the capabilities of the tools that you're using. The example that you mentioned about how there being a direct integration available between Acuity and QuickBooks, you can do that research ahead of time to try and, hopefully save yourself some time. But then even still, yeah, having the experimentation to see what the capabilities actually are. Because there's been so many cases where I do the research ahead of time and I think, oh, okay, something's possible. I see, it should be possible, but then I actually go and I try it and I realize it's not till I'm like knee deep into it, I realize I hit a roadblock and it's just not going to meet my needs. And so I have to pivot. So it's just something to just kind of expect almost in the process. And yes, research helps, and also just test a lot.
Yeah. I love that. And like in terms of research, and Kelly, you talked about this, like think of what are the things that could go wrong. Sometimes it can be hard to think about that. So one thing I would recommend that I've seen is there's a lot of great communities out there. Like for example, the Workflow Watering Hole with Kelly. But ask fellow peers, other accountants, like, hey, I'm thinking about implementing an automation for this. This is what I'm thinking about using. What were some of the challenges you guys had? What were some of the mistakes that you wish you had known before you started? I mean, courses are great too. There's a lot of really good content out there, but it's always great to ask your peers, because sometimes they can really share some detailed things. Like Courtney, you said, you may not realize, oh, I can't actually do that one little thing that makes that's such a critical part of the flow. So asking into other people and seeing what their experiences are like is really valuable, in my opinion.
Yep.
Can I add something else in there? Because we may wind up with a little extra time without Heather anyways. What was the thought that I wanted to add? Oh, for crying out loud, Kelly. Couple of things. Oh, when you're doing a connection, and Courtney, this is probably more your wheelhouse than mine, but I want to make sure it gets covered. I built a Zap from Typeform into Financial Sense from my discovery form. It wasn't running correctly because Typeform, I had it set up, I believe it was for first and last name in one field, and it needs to be first and last name in separate fields. Or maybe it was the other way around. It doesn't matter, but you have to kind of see what is going to filter into essentially the app that you're going to zap to. So make sure that you are covering off what those needs are. And that turned out to be a stopping point on what was happening until I figured it out. And I went, oh, okay, well, that's why I'm getting the failure. So what matches up in the fields for some of those automations, if it's not a native one, is going to be really important. And also in the automations, when you've automated notifications, make sure you're not getting too many of them and they're going to the front. My Typeform notifies me in email, but all of my automated notifications from Financial Sense are within Financial Sense. So where do you want to see again, it's a bit of the outcome, but where do you want to see those automations landed?
Yeah, definitely.
Really good point. So we got two questions. I'm going to combine them into one. So someone's asking, what is the best way to track building your workflows or tweaking them as you go? And then the second question kind of ties into that. Would you recommend, putting time blocks in your calendar ever so often to go back and revisit your workflows and say, is there things that can do better or improve them? Would you guys have any recommendations for that?
I'll just go and start with the documenting and kind of keeping track of workflows. I recommend always diagramming them out with some kind of like diagram tool. You can use Canva. They have a great like whiteboard feature. But having that documented out, it's much easier to follow a diagram, like a flowchart diagram. But you can also just have like a Google Doc or like a Word doc, and you just write out all of the steps. If it's kind of a sequential automation, it just gets tricky if you have like conditional branching. I feel like that's better portrayed in a diagram. It's just easier to follow. But you can kind of just organize them in folders so that you kind of keep track of where all your automations are. But that's my biggest tip for that.
Yeah, I mean, I have the saying, always be iterating. That's for sure.
Okay, perfect. So it looks like we have Heather back. Her camera is not working, but at least we have her here.
You do. I'm so sorry. My computer thought it was a wonderful time to update all the drivers on my computer automatically before I joined. So apparently, as soon as I got on the meeting, it decided that it needed to reboot. So, and for some reason, my camera's not working now. So, yeah, I agree absolutely with Courtney about keeping a log of what your workflows are. I mean, I do a couple of things. One is, I keep inventories of what we're using and what, inventories of the technology we're using, inventories of the workflows that we're using within the firm. When I had a firm, I don't have a firm now, but the firms that I work with. And then, yes, you should calendar that in to review it, right? Because needs change, technology changes. Another thing that I think is really important is to pay attention to those emails that you get from your partners regarding updates and new features being added. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with a client on an automation or a process improvement project. And, they tell me, oh, I really wish that this application did this particular thing. And it turns out it actually does. So, it's really easy for us to get into the routine of using our technology a certain way and not revisiting what is the functionality? Does this actually still serve me? So calendaring that is a wonderful way to do that, whether it's putting, a block of time on your calendar every quarter, and then I always put a block of time on my calendar every week just to make sure that I'm staying up to date on things like that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Heather. I mean, being a software vendor, and I see this with a lot of other software vendors, we find a lot of the clients that we have, they don't realize like you can actually, oh, I can solve that. And whether it's because we already had it, or we're adding new features, every few weeks, it's hard to keep up with that. So like setting some time to actually revisit your current vendors or solutions you're using. Usually they have somewhere like whether it's an email update that's going out, or they actually have a list that shows the most recent updates. That's a really interesting thing to revisit, because you may not need a whole new solution. You could better utilize solutions you already have.
Absolutely.
Can I talk about an automation fail that because I didn't pay attention
Yeah.
to an upgrade? So I didn't pay attention when Typeform changed how it delivers its responses. So it stopped emailing them because they changed the whole setup. So I wasn't getting email responses on my discovery form. And so it wasn't also triggering a Zap. So nothing was going out to the client that they had completed it. Nothing was coming to me, and it wasn't triggering any of my other Zaps from that discovery form. I've since changed it so it's based on submissions, and I went and I reworked the responses coming back into me. But Kelly didn't pay attention, and that caused quite a few automation fails. So paying attention to upgrades is really quite important.
Yeah.
You bring up a really good point too, Kelly, that, even when you're using applications like Zapier and Make and Power Automate, is that those change too. And so one of the things you have to be really careful of when you're using those types of applications is, the partners or the apps that are connected, they change their API. And so if you're not paying attention, your whole workflow could come crashing down because you haven't stayed aware of changes on one or more of the apps. So it is important to make sure that you have processes in place to monitor those automations and to make sure that they're still working the way that they were intended to work.
I'll just say something really quick about that. Yes, apps will they'll change their APIs. It happens less frequently because usually they'll use a stable version before they upgrade, and sometimes they'll even have backward support for previous versions. But the thing that actually changes in Zapier is the integration itself, because these companies develop their own integration with their API, and even though the API might not change, they might decide to just suddenly change like the naming of the fields that comes
Right.
across through Zapier, and that has broken quite a few things for me and my clients in the past. So yeah, it's something to watch out for. Pay attention to any of those like Zapier error emails that you get. I know they can seem really annoying, but usually if there's an error, you want to make sure to read that message to make sure that your Zaps are still working.
Okay, perfect. So Heather, I'm going to go to you for the next question. And this is, so we were just talking about what are some of the essential things you should do before you start implementing automation. But how should you know when your processes are actually ready for automation? When looking at your processes, you're like, I've got them to a point where like automation makes sense.
Yeah. So no, it's a great question. So it should be standardized. So it should be standardized, meaning that it's done the same way every time with very little variability. The data is stable, as Courtney said. So the data is coming through the app in a way that is the same way every time. I used to have Zaps back in the early days of me using Zapier, where I used a lot of the email parser, and that's a really dangerous tool. It works when it works great. It works great. But as soon as the formatting within an email changes, now there's the possibility that it's going to pull the wrong data. So when you're going through and getting ready to automate, you want to make sure it's repeatable. You want to make sure that the volume is there, that it's not something that you do like once a month, and that you're focusing your time on that, and that the data is is standardized.
Okay. No, and I that's a good point. And so there's a question I want to go to that's in the chat right now, and someone's asked, because I know we also have a lot of solo firms in this session. how should a sole accounting practitioner approach automation? What should be prioritized? Like, how do you know what to do first? And how do you move forward without being overwhelmed? So I'll leave that for whoever wants to answer that question, or we could go around if you guys all have thoughts on that as well.
So I'll jump in. I had a rule that I had a kind of I have a rule that I use. If I find that I'm doing the same thing more than a couple times a week, and I know that that data or that particular task is standardized. For example, new clients, right? I used QuickBooks. I used, I had a standard tech stack for my firm. When I would get a new client, I needed to send instructions on how to add me as an accountant user, right? So I found myself a couple times a week or whatever, a couple times a month, whatever, writing out the instructions on how to add me as an accountant user. Well, that's a perfect place for automation and I don't even have to buy anything because I can create a canned email in my email, or email template that has those instructions. I can embed links. I could even make a Loom video that shows the client how to do it. And I've essentially created an automation that's going to save me a ton of time because I'm never going to have to explain to a client again or write out the steps again of how to do that. So that's a great place to start. And I just started writing down as I would go through my week if I was doing something that was repeatable, right? Standardized, and, time consuming, I would write that down. And I knew that that was a place where I could, spend some time working on an automation to save a bunch of time in the long run.
Okay. Kelly, Courtney, would you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, I would just say it kind of depends case by case what you want to automate. As Heather mentioned, there are certain processes that you're taking a lot of time doing that are actually, when you do the research, very easy and even free to automate. So that's kind of a no-brainer, right? You can just create an email template in your Gmail or whatever. But there are other processes that take you literally a second. But if you wanted to automate it because of just the intricacies of the process, it's just impractical. It would just take way too long, and you might as well just do it manually. I'm working through with a client to automate like a whole onboarding process, and it's pretty intricate. And there are a few steps that we aren't able to automate just because of limitations with the tools we're using. And we've decided, we could spend hours and hours trying to automate the last 9% or the last 1% of this whole workflow, or, we can just automate creating a task to do it manually. So at least you're not having to mentally keep track of it. You have that off your plate, but then you can just go and, take the 2 seconds to do it. So it really does depend on what you're trying to accomplish.
I'm going to throw in on riffing off of what both of you have said. But especially figure out where you're going to template it versus where you're going to automate it. But one of the Heather hit on it. I have an automation, same as yours, Heather, but it kicks off from a different place. So if somebody orders a file review from me, they complete a type form for it. There's a payment at the beginning of it, a couple of questions to make sure I can do it for them. It's got a payment, so it's behind that paywall. Then there's some more questions. And then when they complete that form, an email goes out automatically from Typeform that gives them all of the next steps, including now it's created a file review project. It does find or create client. It creates the file review project in Financial Sense. And so now I've sent out, because sometimes you've got to remind them a number of times to do things. So small firms, if you can remind them to do things a number of times without your intervention. So Typeform sends out that email. It has all the instructions in it, including how to access Financial Sense. Everything is getting set up in Financial Sense, but then they get a notification with the instructions, and now it actually is actionable for them. Here's where you upload things. Here's how you do things. And back to what you said, Heather, here's how to add us as an accountant to your QuickBooks file. And then when that file review is done, I'm using the automation native to Financial Sense. There's a templated email that can go out that says our file review is done. Here's a booking link to go over the results of your file review. So it's all those little tasks, which both of you have said, are they repeatable? Are they drudge work? Is it low chance of failure? That the failure is something you really don't want to have happen. But again, I'm back to consider whether it's native integrations or whether you need to make some of those bigger lifts through webhooks and things.
Yeah, I just want to add
say webhook.
one thing I want to add is, I mean, I kind of heard all you guys say is that it doesn't have to be complex, right? To save you time.
Right.
The automation can be very simple, like just looking for something repetitive that like a good example is scheduling meetings. There's a lot of back and forth in your email asking people, hey, does this time work for you? No, that doesn't work. What about this time? And then just like, it's like 6 emails that disrupt your day, take you out of concentration and flow, when you can just easily within 30 minutes set up even faster a Calendly or like an Acuity that you guys were talking about. And that can save you a lot of time. And that's very easy to do. So there's a lot of little low hanging fruits. If you just look for the repetitive things, like there's a lot of really great tools out there. It doesn't have to be complicated.
I got to talk about the online scheduler. If you don't have one, go get one. It will take you less time to set up an online scheduler, create incredible efficiency and automation. It will take less time than it will to schedule, I swear, one meeting. Don't overcomplicate it. They're all very simple to get in. Just find a couple of key features that you need. Mine has polling. So that was a feature that I wanted built within it. So we could decide times as a group. Decide what those key features, and then go get an online scheduler and stop overthinking it. That may be the big automation win out there that is the lowest lift.
Yep.
And then make sure you tie your calendar in properly.
So let's move on to the next question. Courtney, I was wondering if you could share some specific examples of how automation has led to some really measurable productivity gains in some firms. Like, what are some of the major benefits you've seen from automation?
Yeah, I talked through a few examples in my session, but I'll just retell one that was really quite impressive. I'm working with a client right now, and I'm working with Joe Kindred. She's in the chat. She's amazing. She does kind of the operations side. So she set up a bunch of automations in Financial Sense. I set up some automations in Zapier, and through the combination of those automations, they had an onboarding process that used to take them up to a full day, is now reduced to less than 20 minutes for every single time they onboard a client. So that is pretty much an entire day that they have saved. And that's just huge. Like, imagine what you could do with a full day per client. And during tax season, when you're just, just churning through clients over and over and over, you don't have time to be spending on a full day, onboarding a client. So that's my favorite. But also there are other automations I've done where one client had like an invoicing process. They did monthly. And as the owner, she wanted to do it herself so that she had control, so she couldn't outsource it or delegate it to someone else. And that process took her about half a day, 2 to 4 hours. And we were able to reduce that down to less than 30 minutes. So, there are so many cases where automation can save you so much time. You just have to kind of take a look at it and see what's possible.
Wow, that's a whole day to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So it's obvious that there's huge benefits with automation, and it can save you a lot of time. It can improve quality of work. There's a lot of benefits, but I feel like a lot of people sometimes are scared to implement automation. It looks daunting. So Kellie, this next question is for you. What are some of the common misconceptions about automation that might prevent a firm from fully leveraging it and its potential to see some of those benefits?
So just the whole concept that automation needs to be complicated, or the task needs to be complicated. We've already alluded to this. It doesn't have to be a complicated task. It needs to be repeatable. And so don't try to build yourself a 25-step SAP right out of the gate. Pick off some of the easier things and make sure that you kind of get your feet wet with those. So it doesn't need to be complicated. I would like to also say, the overwhelm of, I don't know how to do this, or I don't know how to do that. If you go in, and I'm just going to use Zapier, if you go into Zapier and you just ask it, actually, you can even just put it into your URL bar as a question. I want to connect, like Kelly the Ding Dong, Acuity to QuickBooks Online. If you put that in there, it's going to give you a pre-built Zap. So people overestimate how hard it is to build the simple Zaps. Once you're using more complicated processes, or you're tying together a number of apps, or you're using webhooks, or all of the things, that's when bring yourself in an expert on this. The time that you're going to spend for the outcome that may not be what you desire versus the money that you will spend for one of these automation experts like Courtney and Heather, you used to do a lot of this. It will be money well spent. So don't be afraid to hire out for it. But also don't be afraid to play with it. If you've decided that you're going to guinea pig this on yourself or someone else, people are terrified of some catastrophic outcome of trying to create an automation. Well, as long as you're doing it in a safe playground, you don't really need to put that first and foremost, even though I just kind of countered myself when I said, what's the outcome of a bad automation? But as long as you're doing it in a playground, go ahead and goof around. You can build all the Zaps. I'm going back to Zapier. You can build all of the Zaps that you want, and then just turn them on and off. I'm going to go back to also, people underestimate native integrations, or they underestimate native automations. So back to financial sets. I use 3 levels for automation of communications with clients. Some of you would have heard this earlier. Sorry if I'm repeating myself, but maybe it's good information. So if it is something I need the client to do, to upload, to download, or to communicate robustly on, it's a client task. And then depending on how often it needs to go out or how critical it is for them to do it, then I will set up the reminders as an automation until they finally do the dang thing. If it is an email that is going to be exactly the same thing every single time, then I have now built that into my workflows. Thanks, guys, for putting that in. Super appreciated over there. If Abdullah, you're listening, you know how much I love you. So automated emails within a task, you check off the task, the email goes out, put the guardrail in for a dependency ahead of it, so you're not sending out the end of month email when the end of the month isn't actually done. And then templated emails for the ones that are going to have almost all the same information, but a little bit of a blurb that's going to be different every time. And it's the same for, we can now create a workflow or a project out of a project in Financial Sense automatically. Check off a task, there you go. So a lot of people look to complicate automation and integrations. Look for the apps that have some of the things that you really want to do that are built. That goes back to those solo firms. Pick some apps, even if you're going to say, oh, I don't know, they're a little pricier, or I got to pay for the upgraded version, versus doing these things manually. Then you can go play with your dogs more. That would be and somebody else mentioned, don't build for one-offs. I've been that ding dong in the early days of Zapier. I was so excited to build Zaps. I built Zaps that I was like going to use, twice. It was fun, but it was dumb.
Okay. Well, so speaking of Zapier, I want to go to the next question. Heather, this one's for you. Can you describe some innovative ways that you've seen Zapier used to automate and streamline accounting tasks? Because Zapier can be used in so many different ways, but what are some ways that use cases you've seen?
Sure. So, I mean, I've seen one of the most innovative ways to use it is intercompany transactions in an accounting platform. So a transaction's created in one company, and then you use Zapier to perform calculations, look up accounts, vendors, customers, and then record an offsetting entry in another QuickBooks company. So the beautiful thing about Zapier is you can connect as many QuickBooks companies to it as you need to, or zero accounts for that matter, or other GLs. And so you can get pretty creative about building custom calculated automations within Zapier. Another way to do that is recording commissions. You could build a commission calculator with Zapier by just, every time an invoice or a sales receipt is created. I don't recommend that with a super complicated commission structure, but it could be done. And then I would say the most innovative that I had seen, and I don't want to say the most innovative. One of the innovative ones that I was kind of proud of was I had a client that was using a program called EasyLinks for insurance. So insurance agents use a program called EasyLinks, which basically automates the calculation of commissions on insurance policies and bonds. And so most of their underwriters connected to the platform, and all of that was completely automated, and it synced to QuickBooks. And they didn't have to do any of that grunt work. But a couple of the insurance companies were old and had not updated. And so they were sending snail mail, or it's not snail mail, emailed statements, right? And so these statements, if you can imagine, were really, really long because they had so many policies. It was a workers' comp company, and they had so many workers' comp policies for all of their customers that they had to sit there, and they spent about 2 8-hour days actually entering in the commissions into EasyLinks to calculate, to enter the commission revenue into their accounting system. Well, what we were able to build with Zapier was an integration where when that statement was received, we had it sent over to an OCR platform that would read it, format it, calculate it, and then import it as a CSV file into EasyLink, which eliminated those 2 days of entering. All they had to do was forward that email with the attachment to an email address. And then the app that we used would actually transform it into importable data, and then they could import it. So that was one of the most innovative ways that I feel we used Zapier.
Wow. I didn't even realize you could do a lot of those things with Zapier. So that leads to the next question for you, Courtney. There's a lot you can do with Zapier. It can be really complex. It can be a little difficult to set up at times as well. So how do you recommend accountants' approach to building their first Zap? Because we have a lot of firms, for example, in financials, that want to use Zapier and they're excited about it, but then they get to it and it's overwhelming and they give up, right? Because they can't figure it out. So what would you recommend they do when it comes to building their first Zap to make sure it's effective and reliable?
Yeah, that's a good point. It is especially hard with the first Zap because you do all of this work to prepare your processes for automation. You have it all mapped out and you know exactly what you want to have happen. And then you enter Zapier, and the prospect of actually automating all of those steps in one sitting is just impossible when you're doing it for the first time. So what I would recommend is actually start small. Focus on just a subset of the process you want to automate, and just automate that in Zapier when you're just starting out. Now, if you're a seasoned expert and you know exactly what you're doing, go ahead and just automate the whole thing. I'd still encourage that you test it, one piece at a time. But when it's your first Zap, your first Zap could even just be literally not even a Zap you're planning to use. Like, you're just experimenting, right? You're just going to see, oh, I wonder if I can automate, like when someone books a call, if I can just send an email to myself, or I don't know, something simple, just for you to kind of get used to how it works. And so that you're not like using actual like real client data, right? You don't want to accidentally send your client an email, or accidentally do something while you're testing, and you thought it was actually going to do a fake test, but then actually did something, right? And you didn't realize it. So I would say your first app should just be something really simple. And then also make sure that you are checking to see what's actually possible during your experimentation. Look at the supported actions and triggers for all of your apps, and just be careful with making assumptions about things that are actually wrong. Make sure you do your research and test a lot.
Yeah, I think the testing is super important. I mean, one of the things, Courtney, that I have always done, and I'm sure you do, and Kelly, you do as well, is you've got to have a safe testing environment to try this stuff out. You can't be testing Zapier automations in a live QuickBooks company. bad things happen when you do that. So, or, or even in your calendar. I have my good friend Jay Kimmelman was, he and I were working on Zapier in the early days, and he was playing with something in his scheduling, and he ended up sending over 25,000 appointments to his Google Calendar because he had created this doom loop in Zapier. And so he had to figure out, I remember him emailing me or texting me or whatever saying, oh my gosh, I have to figure out how to get these 25,000 appointments out of my calendar. And he did. But you really want to, so the safe thing to do is create a free Gmail account, right? I have a QBO testing Gmail account that I use that, I connect to Zapier to play safely. And what that does is that allows me to break stuff, but without really breaking stuff. So definitely worth it. And even purchasing a QuickBooks company to play in is really smart. And you can even set up, if you set up an Intuit developer account, spoiler alert, you can get one for free. So if you just go to developer.intuit.com and sign up for a developer account, you can get a sandbox account that you can use. So, those, I definitely think that's something that you really have to be careful with. And then, what I would say is I love what Courtney said about starting small. One of the things that I did, one of my first apps that I built was so silly. It was a weathers app. The trigger was it was going to rain in my neighborhood, and it would send a text message that it was not to forget my umbrella. And I got to tell you, every time I got that text message when I was first starting with it, it was like, I made magic, all of a sudden I've got this thing that I made. And so that's enough, right? And then once you start seeing that magic happen and you realize that you have that power, your creative juices start going, and you start to think with an automation mindset. And then that's when you start to gain the momentum, and you're really able to discern, where are my efforts best focused? Where am I going to get the biggest ROI on automation in a particular area? But if you never start doing it, then you'll never get to that point.
Okay. A lot of really good advice on Zapier. Thank you for that. I know Zapier can be complex.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Nobody's asked it yet in the chat, but I just want to be sure everybody knows, because I've had this happen in some Zapier presentations that we've done. When you're doing a Zap, we're all talking about triggers and filters. This is the most basic thing of Zaps. A trigger is, what do you want it to do? You want it to do one thing, starts in this app, and then information winds up in another app. The filter is, then what are all the things that you want to happen? How is it going to send the information around? There are also fun Zaps for things like scheduling. So one of the, I don't need it now because we're leaning heavily between Financial Sense and Dex. I don't really need those Google Drive folders much, although now I'm looking for that I'm excited about the integration into G Drive. Thank you, Shahram, or thank you, Abdullah. I don't know what you do all day, Shahram.
Yeah.
So I used to schedule creating, because you can create a folder in G Drive on the desktop app and then have it cloned. And you can clone that, or you can build the folder within Zapier. And so what happened was, at the start of every month, it created a folder with the things I needed in it for my clients. I don't need to do that anymore, but that was a Zap, because Zapier also has something called Scheduler. So you can schedule things to happen, or you can schedule things to duplicate. I have a base calendar in my Google Calendar, and I have a Zap that duplicates that into my, if all the conditions are correct, duplicates that calendar into the one that actually links to my, I use TidyCal now, not Acuity, that links to my booking app. So when you go back to the solo firms, I don't want to make sure that I am duplicating my calendar when I do something that may relate elsewhere. I hope this isn't too in the weeds, but it can do all of these other things for you that aren't just sending data from one app to another app. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. So Chat GPT has been a really popular topic today. We had Mark come on, talk a little bit about that and a lot of the prompts that you can use. So this next one's for you, Heather. what are some practical applications of ChatGPT in accounting tasks that you have found really impactful? Because that's the thing about ChatGPT. There's so much that you can do. It's hard to know where to start. So what have you seen has been very practical and very impactful for a lot of accounting firms?
You know, I haven't done a ton of real live in the accounting firm. It's, you know, we're using this particular thing with ChatGPT for accounting. I've played and I've done some really cool things. But what I find and what I hear from people is the communications is where they're seeing a lot of really leveraging ChatGPT. That being said, you know, I did do a session and kind of played a bit with my friend Byron Patrick on using ChatGPT and Zapier to create automations by creating and I can't, and now I'm trying to remember the name of them. In your OpenAI account, you have the ability to actually create I'm going to call them bots, but they're apps, and that's not what they're called. But basically, they're areas where you can train it. You can actually train a particular chat within your OpenAI or ChatGPT account. And what's really cool about that is you can actually reformat data just by using a prompt. So if you know the correct prompts to use, I could actually have a call in Zapier that says, when an invoice is created, I want you to take the amount on the invoice, the total amount on the invoice, and multiply it by 20% and format it this way. And Zapier can actually capture that and send it over to, you know, an action step. So there's some really cool ways that you can do that. Byron did some really cool things with the Zapier chat bot, the bot that you have, where he was able to actually set up he completely automated using ChatGPT, setting up service items within a company based on a set. And he had set up an automation where when a new item was added, it would automatically through ChatGPT generate the description of the item and update it to like a Shopify. So there's all these really cool opportunities where you can create these automations, and it's just going to get more robust. But I haven't done anything actionable myself with an accounting firm beyond using ChatGPT to do things like craft an email or respond to something. So I would defer. Courtney, maybe you've done a little bit more than what I've done besides my tinkering. But the possibilities honestly are endless. And what we're going to see as it goes on is we're going to be able to actually basically just ask for what we want using ChatGPT in a logical string of actions to the same bot, right? Where it iterates on the data to get it to a point where it's super accurate and able to be used in an accounting platform. So it is going to be mind blowing.
That's amazing. Thank you. Courtney, do you have anything you want to add to that? Like any impactful?
I would just say ChatGPT and AI in general just really opens up a lot of opportunities. I've had a lot of interesting use cases that clients have come to me wanting to automate with ChatGPT that I just never even would have thought of. So yeah, you can just experiment with it, see what you can do, use it manually at first, but then once you are doing it consistently, you can just plug that right into an automation like in Zapier, and then it can do it for you. The only problem, or I guess potential problem with that is when you're chatting with it, you have the ability to go back and forth with it and kind of iterate to make sure that it actually knows what you're wanting. But if you set it up in an automation, you don't really have that ability. You're kind of just stuck with whatever it outputs, and AI can be a little bit inconsistent sometimes. So when you are relying on AI in your automations, just kind of be careful and make sure that it is very consistent. And if you are relying on the output being presented a certain way, just know that sometimes AI might do its thing, decide to do it like some other way. It's like totally random, and it could break your automation. So just little things to keep in mind when you're factoring that into your automation process.
Okay. And lastly, Kelly, I don't know if you've seen some practical uses of ChatGPT for accounting firms. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so this is still in the early stages. And I kind of prepped for this question a little differently in what the future of it looked like. And both Heather and Courtney have spoken to it a bit, and that is something called AI agents. So right now, a lot of what happens with AI is a lot of it is copy or building formulas, let's say, or coding. You can ask it to code things a certain way, so you don't have to code necessarily anymore. You can ask it to build yourself a presentation outline. It gets a little flowery no matter how many times you ask it to dial it back a little. It gets a little excited. But you're still taking it out of some of let's go with Chat GPT, because I did a presentation recently at Scaling New Heights. Yay, Heather. Scaling New Heights on Google, using Google Apps. And I said Gemini is a bit of a hot mess in Google. So I'm still using Chat GPT rather than natively Gemini in Google. So you're copying it out of there and putting it other places, whether you're building formulas for Excel, whether you're building content, whatever it is you're doing. I am looking forward to when the agents, those are the things that do things for you. When those agents are way more robust, when they can actually take your content, for example, and put it into a freaking slide deck for us. That's what I'm looking forward to, not taking the ideas and copy and pasting them and then massaging them. And, that's what's exciting, and that's what's coming. AI agents right now are things that you have to build or have Courtney build for you, in that you need to tie them into a Zap or do other things with them, versus how can I just get this AI agent to do something? The information that I have in ChatGPT, just go do it. Just stop telling me things. Just go do something.
Yeah.
That's going to be super exciting.
And Kelly, it's really interesting, when you're doing your tinker time, it is really amazing how much it already can do. But as what Courtney said, it's not reliable yet. So even when you're testing, it could go off perfectly. And you could say, this app is ready for prime time. But when it comes down to it, because the platform itself is still a little flaky and can change from day to day, because we have to remember that ChatGPT is still considered experimental. They're still iterating, they're still changing it. And so there are times where, it has a bad day and you get gibberish. So if you have automations that you're relying on accuracy, that's kind of scary.
Can I jump in? Somebody wants to go back to what's AI and what's an AI agent. Yeah. So I'm just typing it out. I'll still put the type in because for the people who love to read things, me. So AI, this is the super short version, knows things and tells you things. AI agents do things with the information. So I'll go back to the coding, for example. If you want to code a page on a website to look like something, you can ask ChatGPT to do that. I want it to look like this, and yet the super short version. An AI agent will go do it for you. It will now go build that website. So you don't have to take the code and paste it into the code block on a website builder. So AI tells you things, AI agents do things with the information they've given you.
Okay, perfect. So we have just a few minutes left. Before we end this, I want to ask each of you one last question. If they could take away one thing from this for a firm that's looking to implement automation, what's the one piece of advice you would give them? We can start with you, Courtney.
I would say don't be afraid. I know it can be really scary when it's overwhelming and you don't have time. But like Heather's been saying kind of over and over, you got to schedule that time. You have to prioritize it. You're going to be very, very busy, and you're going to hit a point where, and hopefully you haven't hit it yet, but if you have, you kind of have to deal with it. But you're going to hit a point where you are literally too busy to prioritize automation. Ideally, you want to look into automation before you hit that point so that you can have things set up before you absolutely need it. And yeah, just do what you have to do to make sure that it gets done. It can be scary, but just try try to find support, try to ask people for advice and get their thoughts to help make it a little bit less intimidating. But just make sure that you prioritize making sure that your firm is running smoothly.
Kelly?
Can you restate the question? I want to
Yeah.
make sure that I'm going to answer it
So
correctly.
if there's a firm looking to implement automation, they haven't done it yet.
Right.
What's one piece of advice you would give them on that journey to start implementing automation?
Yeah. Okay. So the same as Courtney and Heather have said, don't be afraid of it. Put it in a sandbox. Don't let it run amok out there in the wild. But don't be afraid of it, and start with a few simple things that are going to solve a repetitive, manual, time-sucking task for you. Also, it's kind of fun. Heather already said the fun one she did with the weather. It's okay to have fun in our business day. I did a fun one. It was a total failure. I did not want to send everybody the "Hey, Merry Christmas" text on Christmas morning. So I tried to build a Zap for that. It didn't work out. I didn't want to send it as an email. In the end, that would have worked out better. But it was still fun to play with it. And nobody died because they didn't get my Christmas text. So just it's okay to have fun with them too. Somebody asked what's a sandbox. Sandbox means a little playground where you're not releasing it to the wild. So you've got fake emails, maybe you've got a fake QuickBooks account, maybe you've got fake things. Maybe you've got a guinea pig client, maybe you got a fake client. I hope they pay you a lot. So Sandbox is a place where it's safe to deploy systems and automation and communications in particular. Yeah.
Okay. Lastly, you, Heather.
I mean, my piece of advice would be, I love everything that Courtney and Kelly said about learning and staying up to date. My piece of advice to you is look at what you're already using and look at what features you haven't quite tapped into, because I can guarantee that there's automation that you are not yet leveraging in your existing tech stack that you can implement, and that's going to save you time. It's not going to cost you any money, and you're going to know your tech stack just a little bit better, and it will improve your processes. So that would be my piece of advice is go back and look at how have the features changed. If you've been on a particular product for a couple of years, I can guarantee there's new stuff in there that you don't know about.
Yeah. And if there's not new stuff, maybe you need to get a new product.
Yeah, exactly. If it's not serving you, for sure.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. Thank all of you for joining. Thank all of you for that, for the panel. There's a lot of questions. We didn't have time to get to them all. I'm going to answer two of them real quick, though, because I'm actually curious. So the first one is, will the recordings be available? Yes. You should all immediately have the recordings after this. There's a thing streaming on the bottom that tells you where you're going to find them. But the other question is, are we going to be doing these quarterly? So these workflow summits. So initially, we do Workflow Con once a year. And we're thinking potentially one Workflow Summit or just focusing on Workflow Con. But I'm curious about what you all think. Drop in the chat, like, do you want them to be quarterly, semi-annually, annually? What do you think's better? Does it make sense to do these every quarter? Would you get value? Is that too much? So one person said, okay, quarterly, a lot of quarterly. Okay, well, I'll share this with the team and we'll see if that's something we can make possible. That's good to know. I appreciate the feedback there. There's a lot of questions in here about Financial Sense. We didn't have time to get to these today, but if you guys have questions about Financial Sense, you can go to our website, you can chat with our team, they can answer all your questions that we didn't get to today. But thank everyone. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I want to thank you all for engaging. It's been a great conference. I want to thank all the speakers for coming, sharing these tips, sharing this advice. It's been really valuable. We've had a lot of great feedback. You guys have done a great job. And lastly, I want to thank the marketing team over at Financial Sense as well for putting this together and making it possible. So thank you, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you around, especially at some of the other conferences. See you, everyone.